I never thought that the brightest day of my life, my daughter's wedding, would turn into the darkest memory I carry. That morning, I dressed in the very best I could afford. My hands trembled as I buttoned my jacket, smoothing it out with care. My heart was bursting with pride, ready to walk my little girl down the aisle and hand her to the man she loved. I should have felt nothing but joy, nothing but celebration. Instead, from the very moment I stepped into that grand hall, I felt the sting of rejection pressing down on me like a shadow. I noticed it right away. The glances that lasted a little too long, the lips curling into quiet sneers, the hushed whispers that were meant to wound. My daughter's new in-laws, people who hardly even knew me, had already passed judgment. To them, I wasn't family. I wasn't worthy. I was an outsider, trespassing in their glittering world of wealth and perfection. It began with whispers, sharp enough to slice through the music that filled the air. But whispers grew into smirks, and smirks into outright laughter. They mocked the clothes I wore, unaware that every thread represented months of saving, of sacrifice, of determination just to stand tall beside my daughter on her special day. They mocked my background, the struggles, the late nights, the battles I had fought to raise her alone. And when their eyes fell on the gift I carried so carefully, their laughter deepened. That gift was not just a present. It was a story, a treasure chest of memories, a collection of moments that told the tale of a mother's sacrifices and a daughter's triumphs. But to them it was nothing. They looked at it as though it was worthless paper. I swallowed my pride, forcing a smile even as my heart cracked beneath the weight of their cruelty. I stayed silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because I refused to ruin my daughter's day. Yet inside me something was breaking. Every word, every laugh, every sneer felt like a stone being piled on my chest, and in that silence I made a promise to myself. The truth would come out. Maybe not now. Maybe not in front of their mocking smiles. But one way or another, the moment would arrive when every insult, every sneer, would be silenced. Because the truth has a way of rising, like a storm gathering quietly on the horizon, unseen at first but unstoppable once it arrives. They thought they had the power that day, but they were blind to the truth. Blind to the strength that had carried me through years of hardship. Blind to the resilience they could never break. What they didn't know was that the day would not end the way they expected. The laughter that filled the room would not last. And when the storm finally broke, their arrogance would crumble, leaving only silence in its wake. The church was breathtaking that afternoon, almost like a scene carved out of a dream. The pews were draped with white ribbons, soft petals lay scattered across the floor, and sunlight poured through the tall stained glass windows, painting the room in a cascade of colors. A gentle hush fell over the crowd as the organ played its opening notes. Then, as the doors swung open, every head turned toward my daughter. She walked down the aisle glowing, radiant in a way that made the years of sacrifice worth every hardship. My heart swelled with pride, and yet my hands trembled as they held hers, guiding her toward the man she had chosen to spend her life with. When I placed her hand into his, I felt my own chest tighten. I was letting her go. But in that moment, I could only pray that her future would be brighter than my past. But even as vows were exchanged and smiles lit up the room, I felt something else pressing on me, an unshakable tension. It came not from the couple, not from my daughter, but from the row of polished faces sitting nearby. Her new in-laws, wealthy, sharp-tongued, and dressed in the kind of elegance money could buy, were watching me with eyes that stripped away any dignity I carried. Their stares weren't warm or welcoming. They were cold, measured, and cruel, as if silently asking what a woman like me was doing in a place like theirs. I had no jewels on my neck, no designer fabric clinging to me, no extravagant gift to display. What I did have was a story they could never understand. I was a single mother who had raised her daughter from nothing after her father walked away. I had worked late nights, double shifts, weekends where sleep was a luxury. I had chosen hunger at times so she could eat. I had traded comfort for her education, sacrificed every dream of mine so she could build hers. That was the wealth I had given her. That was the legacy I carried. But to them, I was invisible. Worse, I was unworthy. Their whispers began quietly, just under the music, but my ears caught every poisoned word. They commented on my dress, a simple gown I had saved months for, carefully chosen to honor the day, though to them it was laughable. They mocked the modest gift I brought, a handmade collection of memories bound together with care, compared openly to the flashy, expensive offerings they had laid out as though love was something measured by price tags. Each word, each laugh landed like a dagger in my chest. Still, I endured. My daughter's eyes never left her groom. She was lost in her moment of joy, and I would not take that away from her. So I smiled even as my heart cracked. I sat in silence, swallowing every insult, every humiliation, telling myself that I could carry the weight alone for her sake. What I didn't realize then was that silence has limits. You can bury pain deep inside, you can swallow pride again and again, but there comes a moment when the truth refuses to stay hidden. That moment was coming, faster than any of us expected. The reception hall shimmered with light. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above the guests, their glow reflecting off polished glasses and golden cutlery. The room was alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and the cheerful buzz of conversations blending with soft music. At every table, people celebrated, toasting to love, to family, to the future. I sat there quietly, soaking it all in, my eyes never straying far from my daughter. She was glowing hand in hand with her new husband, the picture of happiness. And in that moment, all I wanted, more than anything, was the chance to tell her in front of everyone how proud I was. My palms were sweaty, but I rose from my chair. My knees trembled as I stood, gathering every bit of courage I had. I thought of the nights I'd stayed awake working 2 jobs, the times I'd gone hungry so she wouldn't, the years I'd spent whispering prayers over her as she slept. I wanted to share all of that, not to gain sympathy, not to seek recognition, but because I wanted her to know that she was my greatest achievement. My voice quivered as I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could utter a single word, a sound cut through the room like a blade. A chuckle. Sharp, dismissive, dripping with mockery. The groom's mother leaned toward her husband, not bothering to lower her voice. What could she possibly have to say? She sneered, her eyes flicking to me with disdain. Her husband smirked, then, to my horror, began imitating me. Mimicking the slight rasp in my voice, exaggerating my words as if I were some clown for their amusement. Their table erupted in laughter, the kind of cruel laughter that burns straight through your chest. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. My cheeks burned with shame, and suddenly the room that had felt warm and bright seemed to close in around me. I froze. The words I had prepared slipped away like smoke in the wind. My daughter glanced at me, her brow furrowed with confusion, sensing that something was wrong. I forced a smile, brittle, shaky, but a smile nonetheless. This was her day, her moment. I would not ruin it by breaking down. So I swallowed the lump in my throat and sat back down, silently praying the ground would swallow me whole. But the night was not done testing me. Later, when the time came to exchange gifts, I approached the couple with trembling hands. I held out my gift, a scrapbook I had poured my heart into. Page after page was filled with her childhood, the drawings she made in kindergarten, letters she wrote to Santa, photos of birthdays where I could barely afford a cake but made one anyway. It wasn't money. It wasn't diamonds. But it was my love, stitched into every page. The groom's father took one look and his lip curled. His voice boomed across the table. "Some people bring diamonds," he said mockingly, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Others bring paper." The laughter that followed wasn't just cruel. It was devastating. Each snicker echoed like a hammer, shattering the fragile dignity I had clung to all evening. My hands shook as I placed the gift on the table, pretending I didn't hear. Pretending I wasn't breaking, and then, in the middle of that humiliation, I saw something. My new son-in-law, his smile was gone. The joy in his eyes had hardened into something else entirely. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched at his sides, his gaze locked on his parents. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't amused. He was furious. In that instant, I knew something was about to change. The room buzzed with laughter, but not from me, and not from the man who had just become my daughter's husband. His parents were still smirking, congratulating themselves on their clever cruelty, while the guests around them nervously chuckled, some uncomfortable, others unwilling to stand against the wealthy couple. But at the head of the table, the groom sat motionless. His jaw was tight, his knuckles pale against the white cloth as his hands clenched. His eyes, once filled with joy for the evening, had turned stormy and sharp. He leaned toward my daughter, whispering something too low for me to hear. Her smile faltered, confusion spreading across her face as she followed his gaze toward his parents. Then, without warning, he stood. The laughter died down almost instantly, rippling into silence as all eyes turned to him. "I think that's enough," he said, his voice steady but edged with steel. The room stilled, unsure whether this was part of a joke or something more serious. His parents shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't sit back down. He looked at them, not as their son, but as a man who had reached his breaking point. "You think mocking her makes you powerful?" he said, his voice rising. "You think belittling the woman who raised the love of my life makes you better than her? Let me tell you something. Without her sacrifices, without her strength, there wouldn't even be a wedding tonight. There wouldn't be a bride standing here, glowing and radiant, because this woman—" He pointed at me, his voice thundering now. "This woman gave everything so her daughter could have a future. And you dare laugh at her?" A stunned silence blanketed the room. His mother's face flushed red, her lips parting in disbelief. His father tried to interrupt, but the groom cut him off sharply. "No, you don't get to speak. Not after that. You can sit there behind your diamonds and your money, thinking it makes you superior. But you know what I see? I see two people so empty that you have to tear others down just to feel tall. And I won't have it. Not at my wedding. Not in front of my wife. And not directed at the woman who deserves more respect than either of you will ever understand." His words cracked through the air like thunder. Some guests shifted awkwardly, others exchanged glances, but more than a few nodded, their silence revealing agreement they hadn't dared voice. My daughter had tears in her eyes now, her hand clutching her husband's as though anchoring herself to the ground. I sat frozen, overwhelmed. My heart raced with a mix of fear, pride, and disbelief. For so long, I had swallowed humiliation to keep the peace, believing my silence was the only shield I could offer my daughter. But now, here was this man and my son-in-law, shattering that silence for me. Defending me, standing against his own parents. In that moment, something shifted. The humiliation that had weighed on me like chains began to crack. And though I hadn't spoken a single word, the truth I had prayed would come out was finally being heard, louder than I could have ever spoken it myself. The groom walked over to me, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "Thank you. I owe you more than I can ever repay." His words sank deep into my heart, breaking through the humiliation I had carried all night. For a moment, I couldn't even respond. My throat tightened, my eyes stung, and all I could do was hold him as though he were my own son. My daughter joined us almost instantly. Tears streamed down her face, her makeup smudged, but her beauty shining through in a way no photograph could capture. She gripped my hand like a lifeline, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Mama, I love you. I'm so sorry I didn't see what they were doing to you." That was when the room erupted. At first, it was a gentle ripple of applause, hesitant and unsure, but then it grew louder, stronger, until it filled every corner of the hall. Guests began to rise from their chairs, clapping, cheering, even whistling, as if they too had been holding back, waiting for someone to shatter the cruel silence. Some wiped their eyes, others nodded in agreement, and I realized I was not the only one who had felt the weight of the in-laws' arrogance. The groom's parents? They sat stiff and pale, their pride shattered into pieces too small to gather back together. Their smug grins were gone, their laughter silenced. They couldn't meet my eyes, couldn't even look at the son who had just exposed them before everyone. All their wealth, all their status, all the power they thought they held in that room, it meant nothing now. The truth had stripped them bare. From that moment on, no one laughed at me again. Instead, people I barely knew came forward one by one with kind words and gentle smiles. Some apologized for staying silent, admitting they had seen the cruelty but were too afraid to speak. Others told me they admired my strength, that the way I had carried myself with grace and restraint was something they would never forget. A few even said the scrapbook, the gift they had once mocked, was more precious than all the glittering diamonds in the room. I didn't seek revenge that day. I hadn't come to win a battle or prove a point. All I had wanted was to witness my daughter's happiness, to see her begin her life surrounded by love. And yet justice, real, undeniable justice, had found its way to me. Not through anger, not through bitterness, but through truth. For the first time, I saw my daughter not just as my little girl, but as a woman, strong, brave, and wise, who had chosen a man with courage in his heart. A man who valued respect above wealth. A man who knew that love without honor is worth nothing. The shame I had felt earlier melted away like ice under the sun. In its place bloomed pride, steady and unshakable. I left that wedding not humiliated, but honored. Not broken, but whole. And as I walked out into the night, I lifted my head high, knowing the world had finally seen the truth. And that was the sweetest justice of all. Life has a way of exposing the truth when you least expect it. Her in-laws thought their wealth gave them power, but in the end, love and sacrifice stood taller than all their money. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it's patience, waiting for the moment when the truth finally shines through. If you've ever been mocked, underestimated, or made to feel small because of your background, remember this: your value is not measured by money, clothes, or status. It's measured by the love you give, the sacrifices you make, and the strength you show when life tries to break you. That night, I walked away with my head held high, knowing the truth had spoken louder than any insult, and that was the sweetest revenge of all. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Revenge with Thomas for more powerful tales where betrayal meets justice and silence turns into strength.